There is a place on this earth where rain has not fallen in 4 centuries. Where the soil is so dry, so ancient, so stripped of every molecule of moisture, that scientists use it as a test bed for life on Mars. Where the ground does not erode, because erosion requires water, and water has not been here in longer than most civilizations have existed. Where rocks lie exactly where they fell 100,000 years ago, undisturbed, unweathered, patient as gods. This is the Atacama, a desert that runs for 1,600 kilometers along the western spine of South America. Pinned between 2 of the world's greatest mountain ranges, the Andes rising to the east like a wall of frozen fire, the Chilean coastal range pressing in from the west, this corridor of land is caught in a permanent atmospheric trap. The Pacific rolls its moisture westward, but the coastal range blocks it. The Amazon carries its rains eastward, but the Andes swallow them whole. The Atacama sits between these giants and receives nothing. It receives nothing, and it has always received nothing, and it does not care. Stand here for the first time and your senses cannot locate themselves. The ground beneath your feet is not sand, not the rolling golden dunes that the word desert conjures. It is salt. A crust of sodium chloride that stretches to the horizon in every direction, cracked into perfect hexagons by millennia of contraction, each polygon edged in white ridges like the borders of some ancient map drawn by no human hand. The surface catches the late afternoon sun and the entire landscape turns to hammered copper, then deep amber, then the color of dried blood. And then the sun drops behind the Andes and the temperature, which was 40 degrees an hour ago, falls within minutes to near freezing. The desert breathes. Not with warmth. With cold. This is one of the Atacama's great paradoxes. It is a desert of extremes layered inside extremes. The most ultraviolet intense place on the planet. A landscape where skin burns in under 10 minutes of midday sun. And yet at night, the same night in the same location, frost forms on the salt flats. The same ground that baked at 40 degrees now crystallizes at 0. Plants that survive here do not grow upward, they grow sideways, flat against the earth, minimizing their exposure to the sun that would evaporate what little moisture they carry in their stems. The desert does not break life. It bends it into new shapes. Geologists age this landscape at over 150 million years. For most of that time, it looked almost exactly as it does now. The Atacama is not a place in flux. It is a place that has found its final form and settled into it with geological stubbornness. The very stability of its aridity is what makes it remarkable. While the rest of the earth has cycled through ice ages and monsoons, through wet periods and extinctions and rebirths, the Atacama has remained. Desiccated. Unblinking. Older than memory. In the north, where the desert pushes hardest against the Bolivian Altiplano, the land rises above 4,000 meters above sea level. Up here, the salt flats do not just reflect the sky, they erase the line between earth and heaven. The Sala de Atacama spreads across 3,000 square kilometers of white crystalline surface so flat and so mirror-perfect after rare rains that flamingos appear to be flying through clouds. Pink birds in a white universe. Life so unexpected in a place so hostile that the eye refuses to process it as real. And yet 3 species of flamingo live here. The Chilean, the Andean, and the James's flamingo, and they have done so for thousands of years. They wade through brine that would blister human skin. They feed on algae and brine shrimp that thrive in water saltier than the ocean, water the color of rust, water that no other large animal on Earth would approach willingly. The flamingos have evolved bills that work like inverted sieves, filtering the brine, extracting the microscopic life within it, converting the impossible into sustenance. They do not look like survivors. They look like decoration. They look like the desert is dreaming of softness. But they are among the toughest animals alive. Watch them at dusk, when the salt flats turn pink to match their feathers, and you begin to understand what this landscape is doing to you. It is dismantling your categories. Your sense of what is harsh and what is gentle. What is alive and what is stone. The Atacama erases distinctions. It reduces you to primary observations, color, distance, silence. And in doing so, it makes the world feel both more alien and more honest than it has ever felt before. Move south along the desert floor and the terrain changes character without warning. Lava fields emerge from the salt crust like the exposed skeleton of the planet. Black basalt flows, ancient volcanic extrusions that poured from fissures in the earth millions of years ago and froze mid-movement, their surfaces twisted and ropey, still carrying the shape of the heat that formed them. Walk across them and they crack under your boots. thin hollow chambers of gas bubble rock that formed in the last seconds of cooling. The desert here is not silent. It pops. It crumbles. It breathes in geological time. The volcanoes are everywhere. Not historical. Not sleeping. Some of them are awake right now. Lecancabur rises to 6,000 meters above sea level on the Chilean-Bolivian border, a perfect cone of ancient lava wearing a cap of snow that never melts even in summer. At its summit, above the permanent snowline, there is a crater lake, one of the world's highest lakes, liquid water in a place where liquid water should not be able to exist. Scientists have found microorganisms in that lake that survive ultraviolet radiation at levels 15 times higher than those that would sterilize a laboratory. Life again, refusing the desert's terms. Negotiating. Finding the 1 cubic meter of impossible survival and colonizing it completely. To the west, Lasker volcano still vents sulfur dioxide in lazy columns of yellow-white smoke that drift east across the desert on the prevailing wind. You can smell it before you see it, a sharp chemical bite that lodges in the back of the throat, the smell of the Earth's interior bleeding through its skin. It reminds you that this landscape is not finished. The Atacama sits on the Nazca Plate, which is driving eastward under the South American Plate at 5 centimeters per year. 5 centimeters. The same speed your fingernails grow. And yet that collision has built the Andes, the longest mountain range on Earth, the second highest, and it continues to push them upward millimeter by millimeter, as you stand here in the heat. You are standing on a conveyor belt. You are standing on a planet that is not done. In the central desert, between the coast and the Andes, the land flattens into the pampas, and here the strangeness reaches its quietest and most profound pitch. The rocks do not look like rocks. They look like the ruins of something. Scattered across the desert floor are rounded boulders of andesite and rhyolite, some the size of houses, worn smooth by the wind over centuries. Though in the Atacama, even wind erosion is almost imperceptible, because the wind carries almost no moisture, and without moisture, abrasion is measured not in decades but in geological epochs. These rocks fell from the Andes in landslides hundreds of thousands of years ago and rolled to where they now sit. They have not moved. They will not move. They sit in the desert like sentinels, and the silence around them is so complete that your heartbeat seems intrusive. On the hillsides above the pampas, carved into the dark rock by people who lived here between 1,000 and 9,000 years ago, there are geoglyphs. Not small. Not subtle. The largest, the Atacama giant, is 86 meters tall. Cut into the hillside above the Tarapaca Valley, a massive humanoid figure raises one arm toward the sky, surrounded by animals and geometric patterns whose meaning has not survived whoever left them. But the figure has. For 9,000 years in the driest air on the planet, with no rain to erode it and no soil to bury it, the Atacama giant has looked toward whatever the ancient sky meant to the people who carved it. Waiting. Witnessing. Outlasting every civilization that has risen and fallen in the world below it. Who were they? Archaeologists call them the Atacaminos, the Atacama people, and they were not just surviving here. They were civilizing. They farmed quinoa and corn in the oases fed by Andean snowmelt. They herded llamas along trade routes that stretched from the Pacific coast to the Amazon basin. They built villages of stone and mud brick that are still standing today, not preserved, simply never destroyed. Because in the Atacama, nothing destroys anything. The desert is its own archive. Organic material buried in this soil has been radiocarbon dated at over 9,000 years and found perfectly intact. Skin, hair, the fiber of woven textiles, the seeds of plants that have been extinct for millennia. The mummies of the Atacama are the oldest artificially preserved human remains on Earth, predating the Egyptian mummies by 2,000 years. And they survived not through the ingenuity of their embalmers, but through the absolute hostility of the environment that surrounded them. The desert remembers everything. It is only we who forget. Descend from the pampas toward the coast, and the land does something extraordinary. It drops. 3,000 meters in under 100 kilometers. The Atacama Wall, the escarpment between the high desert and the Pacific coast, is one of the steepest topographic gradients on the planet. Rivers that begin in the Andes, snowmelt rivers, glacial rivers, rivers that exist for a few weeks a year at most, cut through this escarpment in deep narrow gorges, and in these gorges, something almost unbelievable takes root. Green. Not the green of a rainforest or a meadow. A different green. A thin, precise, desperate green. Mosses and ferns that live only in the spray zone of the rushing water. Tamarugos, Native trees that have evolved root systems extending 30 meters downward to reach groundwater so deep that the surface above them is bone dry. Cacti standing 15 meters tall, some of them 200 years old, collecting moisture not from rain but from the coastal fog, the Comanchica, that rolls in off the Pacific in the early mornings. Not water but the ghost of water, and it is enough. The desert does not give willingly. Every living thing here has found a crack in the hostility and driven its roots into it with everything it has. Watch a Atacama toad emerge from its burrow at dusk. It has spent the last 11 months underground, dormant, waiting for the one night of the year, if the year is generous, when the Comanchica is dense enough to condense on the soil surface. The toad emerges into the cold coastal night, absorbs moisture through its permeable skin directly from the wet sand, feeds on whatever insects the fog has also brought to life, and then within hours, returns underground. One night. 11 months of waiting for one night. And this is not a tragedy. This is a strategy. This toad has been using this strategy for millions of years. It has outlasted species that required more from the world. The Atacama does not reward ambition. It rewards patience. This is the lesson the desert teaches, if you stay long enough. In September, but only in some years, only in years when winter rains in the distant Andes have been generous enough to push moisture into the soil at just the right depth, the impossible happens. The desert flowers. Not a flower here and there. Not a bloom along a dry riverbed. The entire surface of the Atacama, from the coast to the salt flats, from the lava fields to the pampas, erupts in color. Mauve, yellow, white, crimson. 200 species of flowering plant pushing through the salt crust simultaneously, triggered by a soil moisture threshold that they have been waiting, in seed form, for years to reach. A field of flowers across 15,000 square kilometers of what was, last week, absolute desert. The phenomenon is called Desierto Florido, the flowering desert, and it has been recorded since the first Spanish chroniclers arrived in the 16th century. But it does not happen every year. Sometimes it does not happen for a decade. The seeds lie dormant and they wait, and when the conditions are finally right, the desert becomes, briefly, a garden. Honeybees that have not existed in this landscape for 6 years emerge from somewhere no one has mapped and pollinate every flower in a matter of days. Hummingbirds arrive from the Andes, drawn by a signal no instrument has ever detected. The desert orchestrates its own resurrection with a precision that suggests it has been rehearsing in the dark for years. And then, in 2 or 3 weeks, it is over. The flowers die. The seeds fall. The bees and birds vanish. The desert returns to its baseline state, the hexagonal salt, the black lava, the round boulders, the geoglyphs, the condors turning on thermals above the escarpment. And you would never know that any of it had happened. Except the Atacama remembers. Pollen from flowers that bloomed 50,000 years ago is still preserved in the dry soil here. Scientists drill cores through the desert floor and read the history of ancient blooms in layers of color. A yellow seam for a flowering year, a white seam for drought, a red seam for volcanic ash, a black seam for a lava flow. The desert is a library, and every layer of its soil is a page, and every page describes a world that no longer exists anywhere else. High in the Andes, above the line where even the hardiest desert plants give up, where the air contains less than half the oxygen of the coast below, the landscape becomes something else entirely. The Altiplano, the high plateau, sits above 3,500 meters and is a world so severe, so stripped of comfort, that it functions almost as a separate planet within a planet. Winds here reach 120 kilometers per hour on ordinary afternoons. The temperature drops 30 degrees between noon and midnight. Ultraviolet radiation at this altitude is so intense that snow blindness can occur in under an hour without protection. And yet here, in this assault of altitude and cold and radiation, there are flamingos. The same flamingos as the salt flats below. Waiting in geothermal hot springs that bubble at 40 degrees while the air around them is at -10. Steam rising from the water, the flamingos pink and upright in it like living flames, the Andes rising white and enormous behind them. It is one of the most visually extraordinary sights on the planet, and it occurs every single day in a place that fewer people have visited than have climbed Everest. Nearby, the geysers of El Techo erupt at dawn. "80 geothermal vents clustered on the Altiplano at 4,500 meters above sea level, the highest geyser field in the world. At first light, when the air temperature is at its lowest, The contrast between the boiling water and the frozen air produces columns of steam 15 meters high, each vent exhausting its pressure on its own rhythm, the whole field moving and breathing like a single organism. The ground underfoot is thin, a crust of sinter deposited by centuries of mineral-rich water, and it is warm beneath your boots. You are standing on a rooftop. Below you, the magma that built the Andes is still churning, still pushing heat upward through the crust, still unfinished with this landscape. The sun rises behind Lecancobar, and the light hits the steam columns sideways and turns them gold. For a few minutes, the highest geyser field on Earth looks like a city on fire. And then the air warms and the steam disperses, and you are standing on a plain of yellow grass and mineral deposits with the wind in your face and the volcano above you, and the moment has passed, and you understand that this is what the Atacama gives. Not the sustained beauty of a forest or a coast. Precisely lit, precisely brief, earned by altitude and cold and the willingness to be somewhere profoundly uncomfortable at exactly the right time. Down in the valley of the Rio Loa, the only river that crosses the entire Atacama without disappearing underground, there is a human history that most of the world has never heard. The Loa has carved its way from the Andes to the Pacific over millions of years, and along its banks, for at least 10,000 years, human beings have been living. Not passing through. Not surviving temporarily. Permanently settled, irrigating fields, building in stone, developing one of the most sophisticated pre-Columbian cultures on the continent. The Atacamino people knew things about this landscape that took modern science centuries to rediscover. They knew where the water ran underground, and they dug channels, aqueducts, really, some of them kilometers long, to bring it to the surface for their crops. They knew which plants held water in their roots, and which could be harvested for medicine, and which were toxic. They understood the Comanchica and built fog-catching structures that harvested moisture from the air. They lived with the desert, not against it, and they flourished. Their descendants still live here. In the village of San Pedro de Atacama, the ancient capital of their culture, a settlement older than most European cities, the descendants of the Atacaminos still speak Kunza, the original language of the desert, and they still practice the water ceremonies that their ancestors used to acknowledge the rivers and springs that made their world possible. The ceremonies are quiet. They do not require an audience. They are simply a recognition, a thank you offered to the water for arriving, for being here, for not abandoning the people who depend on it as completely as any people have ever depended on anything. In a desert that has no rain, water is not a convenience. Water is the reason for everything. Near the southern edge of the Atacama, where the desert begins its slow transition toward the more temperate landscape of central Chile, the terrain performs one final act of visual excess. The Valle de la Luna, the Valley of the Moon. Wind-sculpted salt and clay formations that rise from the valley floor in shapes that defy every geological category. Spires, arches, ridges, amphitheaters, caves, towers, all of them white and gray and amber, all of them smooth, all of them carved not by water. There is no water, but by the thin desert wind operating over millions of years. The wind here is patient. It cannot afford to hurry. It has removed millions of tons of material one grain at a time, one decade at a time, and what it has left behind looks like the ruins of a civilization built by beings who thought differently about architecture than we do. At sunset, the valley turns red. Not metaphorically. Genuinely, deeply, completely red, the iron-rich clay releasing color as the light hits it at the angle that extracts maximum saturation, the white salt crusts glowing orange, the shadows going purple, the whole valley vibrating in a spectrum that no camera has ever fully captured and no painter has ever successfully reproduced. It lasts 18 minutes. You stand and watch, and you do not reach for your phone because the phone will only remind you of what it has failed to record. You stand and you watch, and the valley is red and the light is warm on your face and the silence is so large it has weight. The condors come at this hour. Andean condors, with wingspans of 3 meters, riding the thermals that the cooling desert generates as the surface temperature drops. They do not flap. They have not flapped since the morning. They tilt their primary feathers and lean into the rising air, and they cover the sky in long slow circles, and their shadows slide across the red valley floor below them like dark water. The largest flying birds on the planet, soaring above the driest place on the planet, in the last light of a day that the desert will remember and you will not. This is the Atacama. A place that does not need you. A place that was here before your species learned to walk upright, and will be here long after the last human hand has turned its last page. A place that has been testing the limits of life, plant life, animal life, microbial life, human life, for 150 million years, and has found every time, that life does not reach its limit as easily as the desert would prefer. The flamingos are still at the salt flat as the stars come out. The sky here, at altitude, in zero humidity air, with no city for 1,000 kilometers in any direction, is not the sky you know. It is the sky that the sky actually is, before civilization puts a ceiling over it. The Milky Way does not appear. It arrives. It fills the dome of space from horizon to horizon with a density of light that makes the concept of night feel inaccurate. This is not darkness. This is the universe, as close as it ever gets, pressing down on the driest place on Earth, reflected in the salt flat below, so that you are not standing under the stars. You are standing inside them. And somewhere in the salt crust beneath your boots, a seed that fell in the last flowering, 3 years ago or 7 or 15, is waiting. Not dead. Not sleeping. Simply patient. Holding everything it needs to become a flower inside its ancient hull, waiting for the 1 year when the soil moisture is right, when the conditions are finally, briefly, impossibly perfect. The Atacama teaches you that patience is not the absence of life. It is life's most radical act.